Hey there, it's the Jew from the Chew on This podcast, letting you know you can leave comments, questions, and suggestions a number of ways. Reviews and comments are appreciated on iTunes and YouTube, and you can check out our daily postings on Facebook. Our Twitter feed and Instagram is at Chew on This Pod, and of course, as always, you can email us directly at chewonthispodcast@gmail.com. So there you have it, folks. Short of a bat signal or an Avengers card, there's all the ways you can let us know how big of a nerd you truly are. Enjoy and chew on this podcast. Welcome to episode 45 of Chew on This, a Nerds United podcast. I'm BJ.
Vic. Oh man, a couple of weeks ago or a couple podcasts ago, we were talking about, I mentioned Futurama. I was watching it. I don't know why I'm watching like all these shows that I've seen before instead of, like I said, instead of watching stuff that we should be podcasting about. I've just been watching like shit that like I shouldn't be watching, even though they're like awesome. So like I was watching Futurama and I finished all that, and I was thinking like, man, I'm like 38 years old and I still love watching cartoons. Like
I know, me too.
and I was just thinking, we were having a conversation the other day. Like, I wish Batman the animated series, I think, was on Netflix at one point in time, and it's not there anymore. I am actually now, because I finished Futurama. I'm like on this cartoon kick, and now I'm watching the Batman, which is 5 seasons long. Did you ever watch that one?
Oh, yeah, I did. I didn't watch the whole season, the whole series, though, but I watched like the first couple seasons.
I started watching that because I can't remember. Maybe it was a podcast that somebody said that they got their legs after the first 2 seasons, because I could
hmm
never get through the first season, so I kind of powered through it. I'm on season 3 now. It's not bad, but it got me thinking about like all the great cartoons that we grew up watching. If I had to like ask you right off the bat, like what was your favorite cartoon growing up, and I mean growing up like into your 40s now, like
Gosh.
what's your favorite what's like the favorite, let's like if you had to pick one cartoon that you could watch now, what would it be?
Well, it would definitely be the Batman animated series. Would be my first choice because like I love that series from the very beginning all the way to the end. And back then, what was that? 1991, 92 when that came out.
It was around the
Um,
time of either right after the Tim Burton Batman or right after or in between the Batman Returns. Because I remember the first
yeah,
season of that show had the Tim Burton theme song, or I'm sorry, the Danny Elfman theme song.
yes,
And then the second season they got their own theme song, but they launched that show with the Danny Elfman theme song from the movie.
yeah. We didn't have internet back then, so like I had to. I can't remember. I was there was some magazine my parents let me subscribe to. I don't know if it was Entertainment Weekly or it was one of those magazines, and I remember that they had the pictures of all the characters that were going to be on the first season of that show, and looking at the animation, looking at the character drawings, I was so freaking excited, and I mean that's I mean Batman 66 was my thing, but this is like I mean, this was Batman. I mean, Kevin Conroy, and then of course Mark Hamill doing the Joker, and that's when they introduced like Doctor Freeze and like Harley Quinn, and they made like characters I really didn't care about before, like awesome, like the Time King and Man Bat and Clayface, and like there's some really like super cool episodes, like story. The stories were really well told, and the animation is fantastic. In fact, more so now that I think after all these years they're finally coming out with the Batman animated series figures that I'm
Mm.
dying I want so badly, because it just reminds me of that time. But what about you? What was your favorite go-to
Well,
cartoon of all
just going
time?
back on what you're saying, like Batman the animated series didn't just have one of the best cartoons for me growing up, but it launched a whole series of cartoons because
Yeah.
it did Superman right after that. Then right after that, they relaunched Batman again with that's when they had Tim Drake and Batgirl in there. Then they
Yeah.
relaunched it again with Justice League, then Justice League Unlimited. So like you got all these cartoons based off of how successful Batman the Animated Series was. So you got like years and years of cartoons based on how good that show was.
Yeah.
Um,
DC just does an amazing job with their animation, man. I
for
love.
for me growing up, Batman the Animated Series I think started in when I was in intermediate school, so it caught me at like a ripe age to get into
Mhm.
cartoons and comic books and stuff like that. Um, I mean, for me growing up, my most favorite cartoon by far was Transformers, and
Yeah.
I have all the seasons, and going back and watching it, it doesn't have the same cheese factor as like if you go back and watch like Thundercats. I remember that show being really cool, but if you look it up on YouTube, it's really cheesy. Transformers has a little bit of that, but all in all, it was like straight action, and there were some pretty like dark things. I remember like the first 4 episodes of Transformers being like pretty dark. Every episode ended on a cliffhanger, even more so
Yeah.
that you thought like Optimus was going to die in the first 4 episodes. Um, but I think for me, Transformers was the one that was huge for me growing up. There was He Man before that, but it wasn't like Transformers. For some reason, Transformers just transcended something about cartoons for me because everything that
Hmm.
even if like when I got into other cartoons after Transformers was like shitty, which was around the time they decided to kill Optimus Prime like 5 times.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, totally.
there was like shows like Mask and Bionic Six. Of
Oh
course
my
GI.
gosh.
Of course during that time frame also GI Joe. But even when I was playing with toys, like when I was playing with my Mask toys or my Bionic Six toys or my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys, I still even my GI Joe, I still always incorporated Transformers toys into it somehow.
Oh
Um,
my gosh, dude. I
so
had some of those G1. I had some of those G1 Transformers, the toys. I had them back then. I would give my left nut to have them back, because they're so. I mean, for one thing, they'd be worth a lot of money right now. But number two, it does have sentimental value for me too. Like Transformers is probably in my top three. Like Batman for me is number one. I'm not sure. Like Transformers would be number two or three for me. But I also remember growing up with the Super Friends.
oh
I
yeah, yeah.
I love the Super Friends so much. The Legion of Doom, and and just all the characters. And I look at the movies coming out now, and it's just not the same. It's
Well,
they
those
really
Justice League cartoons that you're talking about were pretty cheesy.
they were,
They had
but
the
they're
cheese
they're
factor
still
there.
so fun. They're
Yeah,
still so fun. The
mine on the equivalent of that was the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Oh, I like that too.
It was so
Did,
not like the comic books because it had Bobby Drake in it and like had Firestarter and they were like all living
yeah,
in the same room
it
with
had
Aunt May.
it had Iceman, going
Yeah,
around. Oh, what was so funny about that show is when Aunt May would leave the house, he'd hit a button and like the couch would go into the wall and like the
yeah, they had their own
computer
like
system
bat
would come.
cave. Yeah,
I was like, what the fuck? How did you afford that?
yeah.
On your salary of like taking pictures.
And looking back on it,
Um,
like Firestarter it was Firestar or Firestarter? Firestar, right?
Firestar, yeah.
Yeah, Firestarter was Drew Barrymore.
Drew
um,
Ba-
but yeah,
when was
Firestar,
she in
dude,
there?
I had a huge crush on Firestar, big time.
Oh man, they're sexy.
Maybe
Like the
that's where
tight
that's
outfit.
where my maybe that's where my my affliction for redheaded chick started
Oh,
was
the fetish
Firestar.
for redheaded
Yeah,
superheroes
maybe it
with
started
tight,
with
yeah,
Firestar. Wow,
that's possible.
it took 30 years for me to figure that out. I
You're all
owe it
eight
all to
years old. You're
Stan
all,
Lee. Yeah,
why is my pants so tight?
yeah. What's going on here?
I feel all tingly inside.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I just remember that wall disappearing and then the computer coming out.
and
I was
that
like,
stupid
what?
dog too.
Oh
Remember the stupid
yeah,
dog?
that's right. I think even the Super Friends had a stupid dog.
Did they?
At some point, I think so.
I think it was with the
Um,
twins, right? The twins had a dog. Remember the twins that would like
yeah.
they
Oh,
would touch hands. the chick could turn into like all kinds of animals, but then the guy,
Yes,
the brother could only turn into like water.
which is so.
Right? Right? And somehow still Aquaman was still the shittiest super friend.
Yeah, they had the Indian guy that would say a chant and he would get like
Yes. Yeah,
huge.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
had the Asian guy, I think was a tornado, wasn't he? Like he'd spin around in
I don't
circles
remember.
and
I remember the Indian guy because I remember seeing him in the later Justice League series. I was like, "Oh fuck, I
yeah,
remember that guy from the Super Friends."
yeah, yeah. They had some. Those were fun. They are pretty cheesy, but I remember them so well. I mean, I could remember them just as much as I remember like Looney Tunes because like
Yeah.
Looney Tunes still that's in my top 5. I mean, if I were to do 5, but that's like, Looney Tunes have been around for so long, and I never ever got tired of them. Always be excited when that came on. Watching like Foghorn Leghorn, I used to always like imitate him, like I say, and like the little chicken hawk that would try to do things, and the dog and all
it
that.
was big for me growing up because it came on in syndication every morning before I
Hmm.
got ready for school was it was Gummy Bears and Tailspin, I think was Gummy
Oh,
Bears
I remember
definitely.
Tailspin.
Gummy Bears was always before I left for school, and I remember watching that shit in high school. Yeah, I watched Gummy Bears in high school. I don't give a shit. So I remember like it coming on before I had to leave for school, and then when I would come home, like in intermediate school or elementary school, it was Ducktales, and
Oh, that show was fucking great.
Ducktales, then
DuckTales was
Tailspin, right?
awesome.
Ducktales, then Tailspin.
Yes.
Then like Darkwing Duck was out there. Chippendales Rescue
Yes.
Rangers was there too. There was like this Disney like awesome like cartoon hour, and every single one of
Oh
those
my
shows was pretty
gosh.
good. Although I wasn't a big fan of Chippendales Rescue Rangers, but I definitely like Ducktales was one of my favorites. Tailspin was up there, and Gummy Bears. All those I remember.
Oh my
Just
god,
remember I
dude.
associate those with schools because it was either right before I left for school or right when I came home from school. That's when those shows were on.
That one dude, what was his name? Lorenzo Music, I think is what his name was. He was like the voice of Garfield. And he like
Hmm.
I recognize his voice in so many different shows, and I think one of them was Gummy Bears. But he did voices for everything. But I remember I was a huge fan of the comic strip Garfield, and so like when they made that cartoon, I really really enjoyed it. And then like later on, they made it like 3D or so they made it like CGI or something like that. But the original ones were great. It was like the Garfield half hour show or something
Yeah,
like
I
a
remember
variety
that one.
show.
Yep, I remember that. That was
Yeah,
good.
they were so funny. I love that little egg
That
with
was
the
with
legs sticking out of it.
That was
Walking
it
around.
was like who did you like more? It was either you liked Garfield more or you liked Heathcliff more
Oh yeah, that's right. It's like Transformers or Autobots.
or GoBots.
Yeah,
You
I
mean
know. GoBots. Yeah, oh, that's right. GoBots. No, I was
GoBots
more.
actually came out first.
It did really.
Yeah, GoBots came
I
out
did. I
first.
did not know that. Yet everyone always says like GoBots are a poor man's Transformers.
Yeah,
Huh.
GoBots were first.
Oh, that's crazy. See, when I was really little, like my mom would show me like Felix the Cat, which was the old like black and white shit and Betty Boop and all that stuff. And so he was out way before like Heathcliff and Garfield. Man, I forgot about Heathcliff. He was
Yeah.
kind of a dick.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, but
Um,
he had that like really hot like white cat that always wanted him. Remember that chick? You
yeah,
remember with the pink
that's
scarf I think she
right.
had or the pink collar? She was always
He was
walking
a
around.
dick to her. Yeah.
Yeah, he was an asshole.
Um, but yeah, we had let's see, Garfield had Nermal, that little cute cat that everyone loved, and everyone would shit on Garfield, but
Yeah, but
like let her let
Garfield was like
Nermal
the
get away with.
Garfield was like the lazy fuck type person, and then Heathcliff was like the was the badass of the neighborhood. I remember
That's right. That's right.
that was like the big difference that they did the polar opposite of Garfield.
Yeah, actually, that makes sense. Um, Gosh, what other show? There were so many. Like,
Well,
there was
X
a
Men.
lot of
What about
great.
X Men? X Men the
Oh,
animated show.
I love X Men. That was in the '90s, wasn't it? I
Yep.
I did like that.
Yeah, it was around. It was around the same time as Batman too, the animated series.
The other show that came out right before the Batman animated series was Ren and Stimpy.
Mm.
I loved Ren and Stimpy so much because they were just so goofy, and the animation and the stories and everything were just really completely twisted.
That was Nickelodeon,
And
right?
it was Nickelodeon, yes, and like there was very few shows on Nickelodeon that I would watch, but Ren and Stimpy was definitely one of them. And I remember my friends and we would watch Saturday Night Live every Saturday night, and then we'd watch Ren and Stimpy, and I would record them. Like I had all of them like on videotape, and we'd watch them, and we'd like do the impersonation because like the guy that did the voice, I think, did the voice for both Ren and Stimpy. Um, and then
That's
like later
well,
on, like
actually,
I think I got
that's what's his face from Futurama, Billy West.
I think so. Billy West, yeah. And then I think Ren and Stimpy was off air for a while, and then I think it went on TNT or something. Then they got a completely different guy to do the voices, and the show was not the same. It wasn't the same quality. Um, yeah, that dude Billy West, shit, man, he's awesome. He's in so much stuff. Just about any show you can think of, you name it, he's in it. Um, there was something I was going to tell you. I mean, now that we're on the animation kick, there was something. Oh. Okay. So there's a show that Hanna-Barbera made back in like, I want to say it was 91. Again, this was like a time, such an awesome time to watch cartoons because Batman animated series and Ren and Stimpy and a bunch of others. But there was one in particular that I loved so much. Was a show called The Pirates of Darkwater. I don't know if you've ever seen that or heard of it.
Did the main character have like white hair? And it was also
He
almost like
was
anime.
he was blonde. No, it wasn't
Pirates of
anime at
Darkwater.
all. Yes. And it basically what it was there was a planet that was being overrun by this dark water. It was like consuming the planet. And the only thing that could save the planet were these 13 gems that were littered all over the planet. Like, but you can get to them by water and all that. And so this guy like lands on the shore and he's about to die and he sees his son and he says you've got to basically do this quest for me, and he hands him this hilt that's broken, the
I've
sword's
seen the
broken or
show.
whatever. Yeah,
I've
you
seen it for
probably
some
seen it.
reason. For some reason I thought his hair was white, but I remember the outfit. It was gray. Like
Kind of, yeah.
yeah. So
Like he had
yeah, I
red
remember.
boots and
Yep.
yeah, and that show is great because that show's got some major players in it too. It has Peter Collins in it. Peter Cullen, who we all know is the voice of Optimus Prime. It had Tim Curry, who's done so many voiceovers, and he was in the Rocky Horror Picture Show and a bunch of movies. Um, uh, Hector Elizondo, who we all know him as like the guy that he's like in all the Julia Roberts movies, and stuff like Gary Marshall movies. Um, yeah, there's some major players in that, but the show was so like uh, it was really good, but it only lasted for 2 years and only did 21 episodes, and they canceled it because it the production it took too long to create the cartoon, so they shut it down, which was a
Mm.
bummer because you never got to see it end. They only got like 8 out of the 13 gems.
I don't remember the show, but I remember the guy. Like the guy that I thought had white hair was actually blonde, but I just remember that guy. I don't remember anything about that show other than that guy. And it had
Well,
like
there's a
it had an anime quality to it, the way they were drawn too.
It kind of does because like Bloth is the main villain that's kind of trying to find the gems as well, but I think for a different reason. He's just all about the riches and all that. So he's fighting against him. There's a chickie that he picks up, that the main character picks up, and another guy who's like all only out for money, but he like ends up he's like the Han Solo type kind of, and then Niddler, which is like this like flying monkey that like is always complaining and always hungry, and so that show was great, man. I love that show, and I remember just thinking like for 2 years, like every time a new one would come on, I'd get so excited, and then like there'd be nothing. It'd just be repeats for days, and then they just canceled it. And it was just one of those bummers. I wish they would have finished it. Um, what about? Were you a big fan of? I know we talked about this before, but were you a big fan of Real Ghostbusters?
Yeah, it was. That was a big deal. We talked about it before. Yeah, I love that show. It actually recently just saw it come out on DVD. I saw it in the stores, but I don't know why they only put it on
Oh,
DVD. But all the seasons are now on DVD.
oh man, I should. Yeah, I should get a hold of that. I remember those being really, really well done too. At least the first like season was really good. And that was 1990, that was 1986, I think, that came out. But it ran for like 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah,
I
yeah, it
mean,
was
it
pretty long. I don't remember it getting an ending, do you?
no, I don't remember getting an ending either. It's just now getting I think figures too, action figures,
You mean
because it's
again?
celebrating its 25-year or no, 30-year anniversary right now.
Well, you mean
Uh,
again though, right? Because like it had actual figures last time.
oh, oh, it did.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I just saw some recently. They've released. I think when the Ghostbusters movie with the girls came out, they released figures for the real Ghostbusters cartoon too.
huh.
Um, I think so, or maybe was it the original cast? I don't remember now. Anyway, but I love that stuff. I think it's so funny. We live in in an age where they're just now getting around to like making action figures for certain things that we loved 30, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
no.
trying to think of some others. Like there's some, maybe some, what about some recent cartoons? I know you're a big fan of like
Young Justice was a
Justice
Young
League, Young
Justice.
Justice. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
really
still
good.
watching. There's the Marvel one that's happening right now. Um, the Avengers one that's happening right now. Ultron
Okay.
Revolution or something like that. That's pretty good. It's not on the same level as Justice League, especially Young Justice. I mean, the entire second season of Young Justice was this huge plot, and it culminated in like this. I don't want to spoil it because I want people to watch it, but it culminated in this like huge like twist at the very end, and it never it got canceled, and I was so pissed off because like it was a cliffhanger. I was like, oh, I can't wait, and then it never came back on.
Oh, I hate when that happens. I wish they would just go and do like a mini series to end it or something, you know. Um,
Now it's like if you can't finish it and there's a high demand for it, put it on Netflix.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Netflix is a great place to find a lot of that animation stuff. Yeah, so recently within the last few years, you know, I have a boy and he watches certain things, but he really got me. I mean, he got me hooked on SpongeBob for a while when he was younger, and then we just kind of stopped watching that. But he really got into Adventure Time and this show called Regular Show, which I love. It's so freaking funny and weird, you know, quirky. Um, have you ever seen Regular Show or Adventure Time?
No,
Either one of
no, I
those?
haven't. I know it. I know I've seen like the memes for it, and I've seen things that like what not Spencer gives a Hot Topic, but I've never watched the show.
Yeah, I think Regular Show is going to be done next year. I think after its seventh or eighth season, they're going to finally cancel it. And I don't know what's happening with Adventure. It's been like 2 or 3 years since we were watching those, but we used to watch them religiously. And I love it was like Adventure Time and then Regular Show and like back to back, and they're just so freaking funny. Like Adventure Time too is like really right up my alley because it's like, well, I mean the title says it all, but all the characters are like really weird and so all the adventures they go on is really fun and um but the one show that I'm really obsessed with right now, I just binged watched the only 2 seasons. It's only 2 seasons. I just binge watched all of those. Is Rick and Morty. Um, that show is freaking hilarious and not for kids. I mean, there's if you can find the unedited versions as far as like there's no beeping in it, like they curse. They I mean they on the I think on TV they curse, but they block it out like the harsh words. But they'll say you know asshole and dickhead you know whatever, but like they beep out the f words. But I
Right.
found a version. You can find versions that don't have the beep in it, and it's hysterical. It's like a rated R Back to the Future um, because I mean it's kind of modeled after him if you look at him. I mean the
Yeah, it does look
uh,
like that.
Rick looks like looks like Doc Brown, and Morty is like Marty. So, um, but that show is freaking hilarious, man. If you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. It's I don't even want to give away. It's got story arcs. It's got all sorts of shit going on in it too. Like it ended on a cliffhanger, this last one, and then you have to wait, a year and a half for it to come back out. But no, that's kind of my obsession right now. And then I just kind of casually watch like South Park or The Simpsons or Family Guy because they're still going. They go year to year, I guess, contract wise. But
Right.
um, Family Guy is like one of those shows that like didn't it get canceled like twice and it just keeps coming back and like
Yeah,
um
Family Guy was pretty good when it first came out. Of course, there's South Park. There's but before that was Beavis and Butthead. Like all these shows
oh
that
my
like
god.
you didn't want your kids to like if you were a parent, you would not want your kids to watch.
That's Mike Judge, right? And didn't he
Right.
make he made another show for Fox that was like King of the Hill or something like that,
King of the
which was
Hill.
probably
Right.
more kid friendly, I'd imagine. I only
Yeah, that
watched
was
like
more family oriented, but it was still like smartly written. And that's the thing about South Park. It's by far one of the best parody shows on, or I would say not parody, satirical shows on TV. Because every time they do something, it's like if you can get past the racist. Well, actually, they're not racist because like they do it to everybody.
they make
But
fun of
that's what they say.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, they said the second we don't make fun of somebody, that's when we become like that's when it becomes a problem for us. Because
Yeah.
one time we say that we can't do it, that's going too far. Then that means everything before that was game, and then all of a sudden now this thing becomes the thing that we couldn't do. So everything else before this becomes racist. So they make fun of everything. And
Do you know that?
what's great about the show is that if you get past all those jokes and all the humor, it's really brilliantly written of how they make fun of real life issues and how they just put it in your face and say you guys are idiots type of a thing.
I watched a documentary not too long ago about the show, how they go from script to finished product kind of
Yeah,
thing, and
wasn't it
like
called like 7 days to air or something like that?
it's something like that where they can put together the show really quickly now. Like especially if something happens in the news,
Yep.
they can go right to the writers' room, and the next day start animating, and then within like a few days they have an episode.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
they talk about the first season. They were, the if you look up on the internet, they still have the original one they made in college, which was all done by stop animation with using construction paper, the old way of doing it, and it would take them
Yes.
hours. So now what they do is they actually have the same powerful computers that ILM uses for like making the Force Awakens, but they make it look shitty on purpose. They make it look like construction paper.
So do they just scan it all in? They could just move it around, right? They don't have to like
Right,
draw
yeah,
or anything anymore.
they don't have to, like, do it every second by second, they actually can animate it in the computer, but I just thought it was hilarious that they have those powerful computers and they purposely make it look like shit.
They were recently in the news again. You remember Isaac Hayes played
Chef.
Chef? Yeah, and he there was that time where he quit because of his religion. He was a Scientologist, and like they made fun of all these different religions, and then as soon as they made fun of Scientology, he bailed. And
Right.
then and there was that was a big to do. And I remember the creators made that one that made that episode where Chef left or something like that, but they cut together like old footage and stuff,
Yeah, all
like
the sound
old like
clips.
voiceovers, the sound bites, yeah. um but recently it was in the news. It's because he passed away. I think he died a few years ago, but they just like came out in the news recently that said that his like Scientology made him quit, that he didn't actually like say "F you, I'm out of here" because you're making fun of my religion. They his the people in the higher ups told him to quit, which was like kind of a bum deal because like he was kind of a staple on that show. I loved every time they had Chef on there. He was freaking hilarious. He like
So Tom
just
Cruise made him quit.
oh god, come out of the closet. That episode was crazy, but anyway, like it was recently in the news saying something about Isaac Hayes that Scientology made him quit. Like I don't think he wanted to quit. I think his religion like was telling him, the higher ups were like, "You need to quit. This isn't cool or whatever." Which is a bummer. I mean, he was like a staple on that show, and he was freaking funny. He always gave the kids really poor advice and shit. Um,
Yeah. I loved in the movie when when what is it? No, Stan asks Chef like, "How do you make a girl like you?" And he's like, "Oh, that's easy, children. You just got to find the clitoris."
Or the
And then they actually in the movie they actually show the clitoris, like it's just like this like pink giant like godlike thing in the movie.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
They need to do another movie
They
just for me. If anybody else, just let me do it. Let me see it. Because did you watch Team America? And this isn't an animated series, but did you ever watch Team
Yeah, I
America?
love Team America. Um,
Oh my god, that show
did, did
that
you
movie's
know?
so hilarious.
Did
But
you know
that
that originally they were going to do a for shot remake of that
Les
role
Mis, right?
that Roland Emmerich movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and the snow and the world freezing over. What the hell was
Oh,
that called?
the day after tomorrow.
Yes. They supposedly they were going to do a shot for shot remake with the puppets doing that movie, which would have been really silly, and they decided to do their own thing. But it's
I'm glad they did.
that movie's really like complicated. Like when you really watch that
Yeah,
movie, you're like, "Holy shit, like they spent bucks on this thing."
I
Um
love listening to the behind the scenes stuff on that one because like there were certain parts in the movie where they were actually trying to be serious,
yes.
and they would show the dailies to their friends, and every time they got serious with the puppets, it was funnier and funnier to their friends. So no matter like so the more serious they got, it ended up being funnier to to the people that were watching it happening.
We talked
I
about
love the
that.
part where
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I love the part in the movie where he's like saying the girl's saying something to the main guy. I don't remember the name, but he like puts his finger up to her mouth and says like shh, be quiet or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And because it's like a puppet, like they can't make the steady movement over, so like his hands like kind of like flailing in the air and like pokes her in the eye and shit like that.
Oh, that sex scene was hysterical, and we talked about that in the Jason
It's
Bourne pod. But Matt Damon, um,
yeah, it's worse. It's worse in the unrated version.
yeah, yeah, that was pretty funny. Yeah, I've been hearing kind of some rumblings about remakes of Thundercats and He Man, but I also hear that they're trying to bring those live action, which I don't know how you could do a Thundercats movie live action, and even He Man. Some of the characters are just freaking bizarre looking. I don't.
Yeah, Thundercats would be really expensive to do.
Yeah.
Really expensive. I mean, the show starts off pretty interesting where Thundera is basically like completely decimated by war, and it's almost like a Superman type thing where they have to get um, Lino off Thundera,
Hmm.
and you know as they're getting off the planet, the planet blows up, and they're like in hypersleep, and they end up on Third Earth, which is a weird name for Earth, but
Right.
um, you know what's funny is King Arthur actually shows up in that show too.
Are you serious?
Yeah, remember we were talking a while back, like
With
Transformers. There's a
Transformers,
King Arthur
why?
episode.
Why is King Arthur opposite? They're making.
There's a
Ugh.
well, okay, so King Arthur shows up on Third Earth in there because Mumra, and I can't believe I remember this. Mumra is trying to, of course, defeat the Sword of Omens, right?
Okay.
And and that pool that he has, Mumra has, when he asks that pool, like, show me like what can destroy the Sword of Thundera, it shows him Excalibur. So
Oh.
Mumra changes to King Arthur to fool the Lady of the Lake to get Excalibur to fight Lino and the Sword of Thundera.
Wow. Eh,
Yeah,
eh,
I have not watched that episode in like 30 years, and I fucking know it.
that's because it's
That's
so
how
fucking
influential.
bizarre. That's why it's so
Well,
out there.
I remember they won. I remember Excalibur winning in that show. That was the part that was really fucked up because Excalibur actually punctures the Sword of Omens like right in the eye of the sword. And yeah. Well, when I was watching it, it was traumatizing because I was so young. Now it's funny. But anyway, so like so you know the red like Thundercats sign that's in
Yes.
all the Thundercats? Well, when the Excalibur punctures the eye of Thundera in the sword, all of the um all of the Thundercats insignias goes to red, and it's not there anymore. So basically, they're all dead.
Oh wow. What a
Yeah, so that's why I remember that episode
instead
like
of
a lot.
making these live action movies, just make them animated again. Like just update animation because otherwise you're going to get another Warcraft. I mean, Thundercats,
Maybe.
you're going to get another Warcraft because Thundercats number 1 is only like you people our age are going to remember that shit. And like unless young kids today are, there is a lot of young kids out there that love 80s shit, but you have to go looking for it. It doesn't just pop up everywhere. So he
It's
man
a really weird show too, like to because
yeah.
like there's no reason for Mumra being there. Like it makes sense for the other like villains to be there because they crashed along with them, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But it makes no sense for Mumra to be there at all.
Yeah, it is a pretty bizarre show. He-Man's a bizarre show too. I mean, if they really wanted to bring that
Yeah.
stuff out, just bring it out in a normal cuz it's going to be another $200 million flop. I guarantee it. It's not going to be this huge unless they find a way to make it for like 50 or 60 million. I think it's a bad idea. None of these things are working. So, I don't know. What do I know? But I mean, they're like speaking of King Arthur. I mean, we talked about it before, but like they're bringing him back. I mean, rumors anyway that he's going to show up in the next Transformers movie, which that just seems so fucking bizarre. I don't get it. But whatever. I mean, when you again, like we've said it many times.
It somehow if anybody was going to do transforming robots in King Arthur, it would have been Michael Bay.
Yeah, but
But
but were there explosions in King Arthur's time? I mean, I don't know. Maybe,
I don't know the
maybe
if you
gunpowder.
watch the cartoon version of it, it's really off. What other cartoons are we missing from our childhood that were
God, I don't
big?
know. You hit a lot of them. Like when you started talking about Mask, that was like another show where it. I think I was more interested in the toys than I was the show. Like when
Oh, the toys were fucking awesome.
they were really cool. Like I would go to Toys R Us every time I was in LA every summer. I'd be like, yeah, buy me one of these. I had almost all of them, and my friend had them too. And we used
Did
to.
you did you ever watch Bionic 6?
No, I didn't. I wasn't into it. I don't know for whatever
This was
reason.
back in the day where they actually made toys to last because the main portion of the toys for Bionic 6 were metal. Nowadays, you would never get an action
No,
figure made out of metal.
I wouldn't have mind paying extra money for metal, to be honest. I mean, my parents, they went to Hong Kong in 1980 and they came back with Transformer stuff. Like, we didn't have anything like that here. And they were solid metal. And I loved them so much. Like, I had those toys forever. I wish I had them right now. But I had one that
Well, the old
never.
Transformers were metal. Most of them, like I remember Optimus Prime being metal. Parts of Megatron were metal.
Hmm.
They were mixed between metal and plastic, but now all the Transformers are plastic. Even the like the re-release of the Devastator that they released at Comic Con a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
That was
Completely plastic.
I think that was all plastic. Yeah, I mean it looks better than the shit that's out now, but they just made it look better. But it's still plastic. I had Devastator, and he was fucking metal.
Did he have metal balls this last one? Or plastic
No,
balls?
he
No. That's good.
definitely did not have plastic balls.
Good thing that he's not in charge of the toys either.
No,
That would be
yeah,
really terrible. I still never forget. I mean, the first time I visited New Jersey, we went through New York first and went to Times Square and went to the Toys R Us there. And it was my first
yeah,
Transformer that I bought in ages was Jazz, and I could not fucking figure out how to make that thing work, so I just left it at your house. I'm like, here's a gift for you. And
yeah.
like,
10 minutes into it, you ripped its fucking head off.
yeah, I did. I was like, I hate this piece of shit, and I just gave it to you. I'm like, forget it. You know,
Yeah, I remember sitting down one day, like watching, like I don't know what it was, like late at night. And I saw it there, like in between the couch cover, the cushions or whatever. And I was like, oh, let me see if I can transform it. I think I was like wasted. I couldn't do it. I fucking threw it across
you're wasted.
the room.
No, all I know remember is you told me like later on that you're like the kid broke it or something like that, ripped it apart.
There's an infamous, like I think it's infamous. There was an Optimus Prime that was released like a masterpiece Optimus Prime, not like masterpiece like the really good like $150 ones, but there was like this bigger Optimus Prime that was released for that movie,
Uh huh.
and it was bigger than any of other action figures, but it was all plastic. And there's a YouTube video of it online where it took the dude like 5 to 6 minutes sped up to transform that thing
No way.
from yeah, from like 16 wheeler to robot and then back. And I was like, what kid is going to want to? Because I remember like when Optimus Prime was what, like 5 moving pieces to transform him.
Yeah.
Like, and then this thing takes like 8 minutes to transform. What the fuck, kids want to? I don't. I mean, I don't even want to do that.
Halfway through, you're like bored. You're like, forget it.
Like, fuck this. I'm just gonna watch
my
something
my
else. I'm
d-
gonna watch The Simpsons.
my dad, he my son was really into Transformers. He was 5 and 6 years old. He was transforming shit without reading instructions. He was super good at it. But like one day, my dad took him. They were like walking around Walmart or something, and my son sees that giant bumblebee. Like it's
Right.
huge. Yeah, like 14, 15 inches tall or whatever it was. And he's like, I want that. And so like he bought it for him. That thing was like $100. And like they came home and he took it out and he's like trying to transform it. And it's just, it was, oh my God. It was like instruction. It would have took like 10 minutes to do it. It was like really super long. And he got frustrated. He's like, forget this, And so I told dad, I'm like, you need to go take this thing back. Cause like, he can't do it and he's getting frustrated and the thing's going to break and you won't be able to take it back. So I never forget that because then I went and bought him a smaller one and he was able to transform that. But you do it 2 or 3 times and it because of his plastic, it would get really loose and then they wouldn't stick together and the thing would just fall apart in your hand.
That did kind of happen sometimes too. I remember I had Jazz and Jazz, the G1
The
Jazz,
G1
and
Jazz,
in that, yeah, in that version, his plastic arms, like his body was metal, but like his other moving parts, like his arms and his inside of his legs or his feet or whatever were always plastic, but the outside core of him was always like
yeah,
was metal. So, but you transform him so many times in if you watch in the cartoons, if you can remember how Jazz transforms, he basically just does like a burpee, right?
yeah,
He just like jumps onto his hands and his hands tuck underneath.
yeah,
And that's how the toys transform too. The same way the cartoon transforms, that's exactly how the toys transformed. And when he transforms, like it transforms so many times, his arm was just like flailing out like underneath the car
it's
when he was in
scraping
car
against the
mode.
ground.
Yeah, it
Sparks
was like
flying
like a loose
everywhere.
muffler or something.
Yeah. He's like, oh, somebody help me.
Yeah, so I mean that's our cartoon episode, right? Like I I was just we were just on a cartoon kick and we just had to talk about cartoons.
Cartoons are the best, man. I don't think you could be any. It doesn't matter what age you are. There's so many different types of cartoons out now that they're good for any age. It doesn't matter, like young and
I'm
old, and
sure, yeah. I'm sure we'll have another cartoon episode because there's just so many. I mean, we just touched upon them, but I'm sure we'll talk about some of them extensively, but I guess we just wanted to just kind of go over them right now.
well, I hope Netflix does get some of these back. Like you got to catch stuff like Adventure Time, regular show, and Rick and Morty, dude. You're gonna absolutely love. I mean, it's right up your alley. It's so fucking funny.
I'll have to check that out after the Batman.
Yeah, it's so freaking funny. But yeah, well, that was fun going down memory lane of animated TV shows, and I'm sure there's way more we didn't even touch upon. A lot of Hanna Barbera stuff back then that we could totally easily talk about, but and of course films and all
Right.
that good stuff, and more shit to come in the future. But anyway, that was episode 45 of Chew on This, a Nerds United podcast. I'm BJ.
Nick,
Until then, folks, chew on that.
later.